Previously, Donald Trump made a shocking late-night visit to the hospital, only to uncover a secret that would change everything. A forgotten hero, a life-changing revelation, and a decision that could alter history. Trump was left standing at the crossroads of fate. But the story doesn't end there. Now, as the truth unravels, tensions rise, and an unexpected twist shakes the very foundation of what he thought he knew. Will justice be served? And how will this journey of redemption come to an end? Stay tuned for part 2, where the final piece of the puzzle falls into place, and Trump makes a choice that will be remembered forever. As the door slammed shut, a cold silence descended over the room. Trump's mind raced, trying to process the weight of David's words. The possibility that someone close to him could be orchestrating everything, the conspiracy, the betrayal, and even the manipulation of power, seemed unfathomable. David stepped closer, lowering his voice to a near whisper. The person behind all this is someone you've trusted implicitly, someone you've shared your dreams and visions with, someone you thought was your ally, someone in your inner circle. Trump's eyes narrowed as he took in the gravity of David's words. He could feel the pressure mounting. Tell me, David, who are we talking about? David's voice trembled slightly, and for the first time, Trump noticed a flicker of doubt in his eyes. It's someone who has been hiding in plain sight, someone you've worked with for years, your own chief of staff, Richard Langston. Trump's mind spun. Richard Langston, the man who had helped orchestrate his campaign, who had been by his side through thick and thin. The thought of him being involved in such treachery was enough to make his blood run cold. David's face twisted with anger. Langston is not just a trusted advisor. He's been in league with powerful figures from the other side, working to manipulate your presidency for their own gain. He's been feeding them your plans, your every move, selling you out without you even knowing. Trump's fists clenched at his sides. I trusted him like a brother. His voice was filled with disbelief and rage. Just then, a loud crash echoed through the hall. Trump turned to see the door shudder violently. Something, or someone, was trying to break through. David moved quickly, pulling out a small device and handing it to Trump. You need to leave now, Mr. President. Langston isn't just a threat to your presidency. He's going to do everything in his power to make sure you never make it out of this alive. Trump's heart raced as he realized the true extent of the danger. With Langston pulling the strings, it wasn't just his presidency at risk, it was his life. And now, more than ever, the stakes were higher than they had ever been before. The hallway was eerily quiet as Donald Trump stood at the entrance to the ICU, his breath heavy with anticipation. The emotional weight of the moment had been building for hours, but now, standing in front of the sterile glass doors that separated him from the woman who had started it all, it felt real. He was about to confront a choice that could change the course of his life. Inside, lying unconscious, was a woman he'd once known, a woman who, years ago, had been a stranger. Now she was tied to him in a way he never expected. The nurses didn't need to explain to him who she was. He knew. They had all tried to hide it, but the resemblance was undeniable. This was the woman he had unknowingly helped in his own way, with the quiet donation he had never asked to be remembered for. The one he had secretly supported through a storm she never knew he had been a part of. He couldn't help but wonder, how much of this was fate? How much of it had he been blind to all these years? How could he have missed the connections, the hints that had been laid out in front of him like puzzle pieces waiting to be put together? As he stood there, staring at the unconscious woman through the glass, a rush of emotions flooded him: anger, regret, and something else, a deep desire to make things right. Suddenly, his phone buzzed, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a message from his most trusted advisor. The media is about to break the story. You need to act fast. But Trump knew what he had to do. The media could wait. This was about redemption, about repairing the wrongs of the past that had never been acknowledged. This was about taking responsibility for the actions he had long ago buried in the back of his mind. Turning away from the ICU, he made his way toward the back exit of the hospital. His mind raced, processing everything that had led him to this point. This moment was the final chapter in a story he hadn't fully understood until now. As he stepped outside, the cold night air hit him with a jolt. He needed to think. He needed to regroup. The next move had to be the right one, not just for him, but for everyone whose lives were tied to this moment. As Donald Trump stood outside the hospital, the gravity of the situation weighed on him like never before. The city lights blurred in the distance, their glow a stark contrast to the dark storm brewing inside him. This wasn't just a visit to right an old wrong. It was a moment of reckoning, of redemption. He could feel the cold bite of the wind against his face, but it wasn't enough to shake the thoughts that plagued him. His mind was a whirlwind of questions, of moments he'd overlooked, of decisions that could have been made differently. What if I'd known? What if I had made the connections earlier, he thought, but it was too late for regrets. The truth had been laid out before him, and there was no turning back. He had to face the consequences of his actions, and he knew that doing so could either be his salvation or his undoing. Taking a deep breath, Trump made his decision. He would stay. He would be present in this moment, not just as the former president, but as a man seeking redemption. The woman in the ICU needed him, and in a way, he needed her too. It was time to confront the past, head on. As Trump made his way back into the hospital, a sudden noise echoed down the hallway, a shout. He froze, instinctively reaching for his phone to call for help, but as he turned the corner, he found himself face to face with someone he hadn't expected to see, the woman from the ICU. She was standing in front of a nurse's station, her face pale but determined, her eyes fixed on him as if she had been waiting for this moment. There was no hesitation in her gaze, no fear. She knew what had to be said, what had to be done. "Mr. Trump," she said, her voice steady despite the obvious pain in her body. "You were right. It's time." Trump didn't know what to say. He'd been expecting her to remain unconscious for much longer. But here she was, in front of him, alive, awake, and confronting the truth. I didn't know," he stammered, his voice betraying him. He took a cautious step toward her. "I didn't know who you were." She nodded. "I know, but you've done more for me than anyone ever knew. And now it's time to set things straight. There's more to this than you think." The tension in the room thickened. Trump felt a cold sweat on his brow. She was right. There was more. The past wasn't just a series of disconnected events. It was a chain that had led to this very moment, this very conversation. And if he didn't follow it to its end, he would miss the most important part of all. The woman gestured toward a nearby office. "We need to talk in private," she said. "There's something you don't know about me, something that changes everything." Trump followed her into the small, sterile room. The door closed behind them with a soft click, and for a moment there was silence. Both of them knew that what was about to be said would alter the course of their lives forever. "I was the one," she began, "who saved you." Trump blinked, taken aback. "What? How could you have—" "I was the one who warned your team about the threat. I gave them the intel they needed to protect you. The world didn't know. No one knew. It was supposed to be a secret." The shock in Trump's eyes was evident. His mind raced, trying to piece together the puzzle she had just handed him. "But why? Why didn't you ever come forward? Why didn't you tell anyone?" She met his gaze. "Because I didn't want the recognition. I wanted to stay out of the spotlight, but I've spent years seeing the truth buried, and it's time for someone to bring it to light. Trump's heart pounded in his chest. The reality of her words hit him hard. He had been unknowingly living in the shadow of a hero, and now it was time to confront that truth. The woman standing before him had risked everything, and in return, her sacrifice had been erased. "I can't undo the past," Trump said softly, "but I can make sure it's never forgotten. Your name will be known. You'll get the recognition you deserve." The woman's eyes softened, a quiet smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "That's all I've ever wanted." As they stood there, the weight of their shared history settled between them, binding them together in a moment of understanding and resolution. For Trump, this was no longer just about political battles or public acclaim. It was about doing what was right. It was about giving someone the justice they deserved. And for the woman, it was a moment of peace. Her past had been a heavy burden, but now, at last, she would be seen for the hero she truly was. Trump turned toward the door. "Let's go. There's a lot of work to do." As they stepped out of the room, the world outside awaited them. But for now, in this quiet corner of the hospital, a hero had finally been acknowledged. The news broke within hours. The world was shocked. The woman who had saved the life of Donald Trump was no longer a mystery. Her name was out there, and with it came the recognition she had long deserved. The media couldn't get enough of the story, the untold tale of the secret hero, the woman who had risked everything to protect the president. Trump's approval ratings surged. His enemies were silent in the face of such a powerful act of redemption. The story was far from over, but for the first time in years, Trump felt like he was on the right side of history. The pounding at the door grew louder, each thud shaking the room. Trump, still reeling from David's shocking revelation, grabbed the device and motioned for Emily to move toward the window. "Go, I'll cover you." Emily, clearly terrified, hesitated for a moment, but nodded. She knew this wasn't just about politics anymore. It was life and death. David kept his eyes on the door, his hand gripping his gun tightly. "We need to get out of here now." Just as they reached the window, a figure emerged from the shadows, his face shadowed under a hood. It was Richard Langston. Trump's breath caught in his throat. "Langston!" "What the hell is going on?" he demanded, his voice loud and authoritative. Langston stepped forward, his cold eyes locking onto Trump's. "I've worked for this moment for years, Mr. President. You have no idea how much I've sacrificed to get this far." His voice was calm, almost eerie, as if he had prepared for this confrontation for far too long. David moved in front of Trump, his hand gripping the weapon tightly. "You're not getting away with this, Langston." Langston smirked. "You don't have a choice, David, and you certainly don't have the upper hand here. This is the end of the line for both of you." The tension in the room was palpable, and as the standoff reached its peak, the sound of police sirens began to wail in the distance. Time seemed to slow as the room filled with the heavy weight of impending danger. Just as the standoff reached its breaking point, Langston's expression shifted from confidence to unease. He glanced over his shoulder as if sensing something, or someone, lurking in the shadows. Before Trump or David could react, a figure appeared from the opposite side of the room, none other than Emily, her hand gripping a gun of her own. Trump's eyes widened as he realized the shocking truth. "Emily?" he gasped, his voice a mixture of shock and disbelief. You were working with Langston?" Emily's face twisted with regret. "I didn't have a choice, Mr. President. Langston offered me everything: power, influence, the ability to change things from the inside. I thought I could control it. I thought I could make things right." David stepped forward, his eyes filled with betrayal. "You were with him all along. You knew exactly what he was planning." Emily lowered her gaze, her hands trembling. "I didn't want to hurt you, Donald. I never did. But when you're in too deep, there's no way out. I tried to get out, but Langston wouldn't let me." Langston, now in a corner, smirked. "It's too late, Emily. You've already chosen your side." The tension had reached its breaking point. The gunfire was deafening, the silence only broken by the echoes of each shot fired. David and Trump had no choice but to act. With Emily's betrayal weighing on their minds, the two men fought back fiercely, determined to survive, and to make sure Langston didn't get away. The room erupted into chaos. David, now focused on survival, aimed his weapon at Langston, his body moving with precision, every action dictated by the knowledge that his life depended on it. "Get down!" David shouted to Trump, pushing him behind a nearby table. But Langston, moving faster than anyone expected, was already making his move. The glint of steel flashed in the dim light as Langston drew a concealed knife, lunging toward them. Trump's heart raced. He hadn't been in a situation like this since his days in the business world, where every negotiation, every meeting, felt like a battle. But this was different. This wasn't just politics or money, it was life and death. David fired first. A single shot rang out, but Langston dodged, moving with a speed and grace that shocked everyone in the room. The blade gleamed, inches from David's chest, as Langston came for him. Trump's adrenaline surged. He didn't have time to think. Without hesitation, he grabbed a chair and hurled it toward Langston, knocking the knife from his hands. It wasn't much, but it gave David the opening he needed. "You're not going to win this," David said, his voice low and steady, even as his breath came in ragged gasps. Langston, now on the defensive, backed toward the window. The tension was suffocating, but as he reached for a gun holstered behind his back, he suddenly froze. Before Langston could make another move, a voice, calm but firm, cut through the air. "Enough!" The doors burst open, and a dozen Secret Service agents stormed the room, their guns raised. It was the cavalry, but not in the way anyone had expected. Their leader was none other than the head of security himself, Captain Franklin. Trump, momentarily stunned, couldn't quite believe his eyes. You knew about all of this?" Captain Franklin nodded grimly, stepping forward. "Langston isn't the only one who's been playing a dangerous game, but this isn't the time for explanations." He gestured for the agents to secure the room and apprehend Langston. "There's still work to be done, Mr. President. The fight isn't over yet." Trump, still processing the shocking events, looked at David and then to Emily, who was standing at the corner of the room. Her face was filled with guilt and regret. "You're going to have to face the consequences, Emily," Trump said, his voice laced with disappointment. Emily didn't respond. Her eyes were filled with sorrow. She'd played a dangerous game and lost. Captain Franklin turned to Trump. "We need to move, sir. Langston's allies are close, very close. The real battle is just beginning." Trump followed Captain Franklin and David down a darkened hallway, the weight of the situation pressing heavily on his shoulders. The Secret Service agents moved quickly and efficiently, but Trump couldn't shake the feeling that there was more at play here than he had realized. "How deep does this go?" Trump asked, his voice hoarse as they passed through a series of locked doors. "Deep enough that it's been going on for years," David replied. "Langston wasn't the mastermind. He was just the pawn." Trump's brow furrowed. "Then who the hell is behind this?" David hesitated before responding, glancing at Captain Franklin. "There are people far more powerful than Langston pulling the strings. People who want to see you fail, Mr. President. People who've been manipulating the system from the inside." Captain Franklin stepped forward, his face grim. "We're talking about people at the highest levels, people who have infiltrated your own administration. They reached a large steel door far removed from the public areas of the facility. It was fortified, locked, and guarded by 2 Secret Service agents. This was not a place Trump had ever been to before. "What is this?" Trump asked, his curiosity piqued. "This," Captain Franklin said as he typed in a security code, is where we keep the secrets, the files, the truth, the people behind Langston. The door opened with a low hiss, revealing a room filled with monitors, papers, and hard drives. Everything looked official, but something about it felt wrong. David stepped forward and began flipping through files on a desk. There are names here, people who shouldn't be connected to the presidency. Donors, foreign agents, corporate elites. Trump's stomach churned. Why didn't you tell me about this sooner? David looked up. Because we weren't sure who to trust, sir, but we've been gathering evidence for months. We knew it would take something extreme to get your attention. Trump's eyes scanned the room. He knew this wasn't just about him anymore. This was about the future of the country. So, what do we do now? He asked. Captain Franklin closed the door behind them. Now we prepare for the fight. We'll expose everyone involved, but we have to move fast. This goes beyond your presidency. It's about the people. It was time to take the fight to the people, to show them the truth. Trump, David, and Captain Franklin had uncovered the heart of the conspiracy. Now they had to expose it for all to see. The plan was set in motion, but as they worked, Langston's network fought back with everything they had. Trump wasn't just a man who had been betrayed. He was now the leader of a movement, a mission to uncover the dark forces at work and to bring justice to the American people.